Welcome everyone to the 2019 Mazda CX-3 GT all-wheel drive. Because we're in the GT, we have everything. The top trim comes with pretty much every feature, every piece of technology that you can want. We've got the touchscreen in front of us here, we've got the Mazda Connect infotainment system, we've got a heads-up display, plenty of safety tech, which I'll break down a little further. But what we are looking at is a very well-equipped subcompact crossover. Now this car is based on the Mazda 2, a car that we don't strictly get here in Canada. It exists as a Toyota, weirdly enough, but what I have actually just found out this past week is that although you can't buy a Mazda 2 hatchback in America, you can buy it in Puerto Rico. I'm going to link the article just down below in the comments section so you can see the process of what you have to go through. It's an interesting little story. But back to this car here. We are essentially looking at a raised Mazda 2. You can see when you open up the doors, that plastic cladding is really just tacked on. The all-wheel drive system, of course, is a pretty significant feature for people that are trying to buy a crossover. People do want that extra ride height. They do want that added factor of knowing that when we do have those harsh winter months, as I know I experience here in this part of the world, having that extra security, that extra peace of mind is worth the upcharge to a lot of people. For the 2019 model year, the CX-3 did receive a fair few upgrades. Some small, but some are quite significant. So some of the small upgrades, the 2-litre engine can now produce 148 horsepower versus 146. Are you really going to notice that 2 extra horsepower? I don't really think so, but it still produces the same 146 pound-feet of torque. We've got a few upgrades in terms of refinements. We have a little extra sound deadening materials, but the biggest change that I think you'll notice is everything to do with this center tunnel. It's completely redesigned from the model year before it, and one of the weird things about the 2018 CX-3 was the placement of the dials and buttons that you use to interact with the infotainment system. Like I said, it is a touchscreen, but only when you stop. So when you're driving along, you have to resort to using these buttons here. And they were kind of at a weird angle. You had to really crink your arm around to try and get to them. And if you were in the absolute basic model, the GX, you didn't have an armrest here in the center. That was one of my biggest complaints of that car, is just why would they not have it? You didn't have anywhere to rest your arm, and you just felt like you had to fold both of your arms into your lap. Now, although this design has been refined in the way that I can comfortably rest my arm, and it is a perfect point to reach for the dial and all the buttons below, it still isn't perfect. You don't really have an enclosed spot. When you lift this up, it's all open for you to divide items, really. There's nowhere for you to hide something in the center compartment. You would have to resort to the glove box if you wanted to do that. And you don't necessarily have a cup holder of sorts. You've got an open space here, which would be good for a large water bottle, but if you had something thin and tall, like a Red Bull can, that doesn't fit very well. And then when you press on this button, you have this spring-loaded cup holder here, which still is okay, but it wobbles around too much. So again, if you've got a small coffee cup or you've got a thin Red Bull can, it doesn't hold in place very well. Talking about other things about the interior, well, being in this top line GT, you do get a few nice upgrades. We have this suede trim similar to the Mazda 6 that's here on the door cards and right in front of the dashboard here. It's lovely to look at, lovely to touch. The stitching is great as well. All of your climate control settings laid out very simply. You got the USB outlets and power socket down there, all very straightforward. And I like the tiny little red details that we have in the air vents here. The way the air vents are laid out with the 3 circles and the one kind of hidden strip here is very similar to the Mazda MX-5. Although this looks great, there's still a few harder plastics that you can go searching for, like at the top of the door cards and at the bottom. But where you rest your legs, here on the door card is soft, and here on the center tunnel is soft. The seats feel fantastic. Here they're heated, as well as the steering wheel. What Mazda does well with all of their vehicles is a well thought out design language that makes one hell of a good looking car. And this CX-3, without question, is the best looking car in its class to my eye. It's stubby, but it's got a stance, and it seems like it's on the edge, like it's eager, it's got a personality. I especially love it in this ceramic exterior color. It's a $200 option, but I would pay for it because it reminds me in a way of like Audi's Nardo Grey. It just works. It seems to fit every environment really well. Now let's talk about the driving dynamics, because again, this is something that Mazda does fairly well in their vehicles. The steering has a brilliant heft to it. It's neither too light nor too heavy. There's not a lot of feel coming through it. You can very easily place the wheel exactly where you want, and you can do these really fast steering motions, and it responds incredibly well. Because of that extra height, you're going to have a taller center of gravity. That means that you're going to have the car roll around a bit. As someone that's 6'4", there is no way I'm going to be sitting behind myself and be happy. In all honesty, I'm looking at a tall man struggle factor of 10 trying to get in the back seat of this car. I wouldn't even consider a trip down the block in the back seat of this. It's far too uncomfortable. And then with the safety sense system, you get some of the things that you should expect, like automatic lights and high beams. You get radar assisted cruise control. You have a lane keep assist system, but it's a passive system, so it only alerts you with a beep that you're going over the line. The steering wheel won't turn to put you back into place. And then you also have this heads-up display, which I think is maybe the worst part of this car. You can't seem to turn it off. You can't seem to hide it away. And I really wish you could, because I don't like looking at it for information. I don't feel like I'm looking onto the bonnet and onto the road. I do feel like I'm just looking at the top of the steering wheel. You can change around the height of it, of course, of where the image is being shown, but for me to be in my perfect driving position, I have to push it too low into the top of the dashboard. It doesn't seem like a heads-up display. It really does seem more like a heads-down, focus on me and not the road display. With the automatics, you'll get a sport mode, and you can shift manually with the paddles behind the wheel. They do a lot better of a job than I think they have any right to, and you can have some fun in sport mode. It won't change much beyond the transmission mapping and the throttle response. There's no way to increase the rigidity or make it a more level riding car, but you can play around and drop a couple and have more fun driving this car than you could really expect out of this class of vehicle. You actually do have a fair amount of versatility with the boot. You have 2 levels that you can load things onto, and I really like how that on the topmost level you'll have a flat loading floor, and you can hide the security cover underneath that. Also have the spare wheel hidden, as you can see. The 2-litre is naturally aspirated. It sounds fairly good, and it may not be fast, but one of the biggest problems I had with one of the competitors of this car, the Ford EcoSport, is that neither of the engines felt like they were really doing much. It always felt you were holding up traffic. This, though, it is a little bit lighter than the EcoSport. With the subcompact crossover class, there are so many competitors in this field, and you can be fairly certain that the marques that don't have a car for this category will be throwing their hats into the ring in no time at all. But for right now, if you're looking to buy a subcompact crossover, I really do think the Mazda CX-3 GT all-wheel drive is a car you could buy today and be very, very satisfied. And that does it for me. Thank you so much for taking the time to watching this video. If you like what you see here in this review, let me know with a comment down below, and hit the subscribe button as well, just so I know you want to stay around.